This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Medical aid pours into India as hospitals grapple with a surge of COVID-19 deaths and cases. The WHO launches review of China's Sinopharm vaccine for emergency use. And Chad's Transitional Military Council appoints an interim prime minister. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. There are more stories making headlines this hour. In your business news, Total suspends Mozambique operations after Islamist militants attack town. And the latest in sports, South Africa makes a winning start to 2023 Netball World Cup qualification campaign. International aid is arriving in India, where the coronavirus outbreak is reported to have spiraled out of control. The country is still experiencing the world's worst daily surge in cases. On Tuesday, more than 2,700 deaths were reported, along with over 320,000 new infections. It's being reported that crematoriums are being pushed to their limits. Neighboring countries and allies have been rushing to send medical assistance. A train carrying oxygen tankers arrived in the capital, New Delhi, where hospitals have been running out of supplies.
India is facing an out-of-control public health crisis. Hundreds of thousands of patients are pouring into hospitals to seek treatment for COVID-19. But due to shortages of oxygen in beds, many are being turned away.
His condition is a bit serious. We're standing here without oxygen and a patient in the middle of the road without any hope.
It's been 2 hours. I've been waiting here since 8 in the morning. As far as I can see, I won't be able to get in for another hour or maybe more. I have a car and I'm sitting in it. But where will a poor person sit if he is sick?
Crematoriums are working day and night to cope with the soaring deaths. The World Health Organization says this unprecedented crisis in India is beyond heartbreaking.
WHO is doing everything we can, providing critical equipment and supplies, including thousands of oxygen concentrators, prefabricated mobile field hospitals, and laboratory supplies.
A number of nations are sending aid to help India battle this new wave of infections. China says 800 oxygen concentrators have been sent from Hong Kong to Delhi, and 10,000 more are scheduled to arrive in a week. A foreign ministry spokesperson says Beijing is willing to support Delhi with all the help it needs.
We are making it clear that we stand ready to help India fight its recent outbreak. Both sides have been communicating on the matter. If India puts forward specific needs, China is willing to provide support and assistance to the best of its ability.
The U.S. has promised to provide medical equipment and protective gear to India, as well as raw materials for vaccines to India's manufacturers. The State Department says it's working non-stop to deliver these supplies, and President Joe Biden has vowed to help India overcome the difficulties in its time of need. Both France and Germany have also promised to provide medical aid, including oxygen, as soon as possible. And Russia says India will receive the first batch of its Sputnik V vaccines on May the 1st. Gao Yiming, CGTN.
Media in India report that Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan has tested positive for COVID-19. That's as countries around the world are offering to aid India to help it fight this new wave of infections. Ravinda Bawa has more.
We were confident. Our spirits were up after successfully tackling the first wave of COVID-19. But this storm has shaken the nation.
To combat this storm, India has reached out for support to other countries. The second wave of pandemic has caught India unawares. The nation is gasping for breath as there is a major shortage of oxygen.
To control the situation, it's very important that as many or more people recover as new cases come in. This will also help in reducing the demand for oxygen. When the demand for oxygen decreases, only then will the gap between the supply and demand be met. Yesterday, oxygen supply was a bit smoother compared to the previous days, and I hope it will be completely smooth in a day or two.
India's second wave is fueled by laxity on the part of central and the state governments. While people's gatherings are restricted to 50 or 100, the political rallies see thousands gather in the states where elections are being held. Another super spreader event is the religious fair Kumbh Mela, where thousands gather to bathe in the river Ganges. All this has led to a false sense of belief that India has beaten the virus.
If the leaders are doing a lot of rallies and protests and dharnas without any mask, it speaks volumes about it. So it is very important for us to understand that these rallies should either stop or the people should take proper precautions of social distancing and wearing the mask.
While the governments took the lull before the storm lightly, the people too are not masking up. This volunteer is urging people to wear their masks. Experts have raised concerns about the spread of more contagious variants of the disease after thousands participated in political rallies and religious festivals. The jubilation of beating the virus is over. Ravinder Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
The World Health Organization is reviewing China's two biggest COVID vaccines for possible emergency use. Sinopharm is being considered first, followed by Sinovac next month. A decision could come within days. As Tony Waterman explains from Brussels, getting the green light could make Sinopharm a major player in the fight to stamp out the virus.
During this process, the WHO's Technical Advisory Group will review all of the data available on the Sinopharm vaccine. They want to make sure that it's safe, that it's at least 50% effective, and that the manufacturing process is up to standard. Now, the WHO told me earlier that the vaccine will only be approved when it meets all the necessary criteria, and a decision is expected by the end of the week. Now, if Sinopharm gets the green light, the jab could very quickly be rolled out worldwide in what would be a massive victory for China's biotech industry. The WHO has backed only 3 other vaccines so far: Pfizer-BioNTech, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. Getting the sign-off from the WHO would also give the Sinopharm vaccine global credibility after it faced criticism for not releasing enough data and after Beijing's top disease control official raised questions about the effectiveness of Chinese vaccines in general. Adding another vaccine to the global arsenal could also help revive the floundering COVAX facility. That's that program to provide vaccines to low-income countries. It has been struggling to get ample supplies amid export bans and hoarding. Some countries in that program have yet to receive a single dose. Now, both Sinopharm and Sinovac, another Chinese vaccine that's up for review starting next week, have applied to be part of the COVAX facility. WHO approval may also open the door to wider distribution of Sinopharm in Europe, which right now is mostly limited to the Eastern Bloc. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Meanwhile, several African countries have received donations of Chinese-developed vaccines. This as the continent works to vaccinate its population against the virus. CGTN's Robert Ngila reports.
There are 4 COVID-19 vaccines currently manufactured by China and approved for use. 2 of these vaccines have been developed by subsidiaries of the China National Pharmaceutical Group, known as Sinopharm. A third vaccine, known as CoronaVac, has been developed by biopharmaceutical company Sinovac. The 4th vaccine approved for general use is from CanSino Biologics. Both vaccines by Sinopharm and Sinovac are inactivated vaccines. Now, what this means is they use the killed version of the virus that causes the disease. Both can also be stored at standard refrigerator temperatures of between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius, making them ideal for the African continent. Now, to date, China has donated over 6 million vaccine doses to at least 23 African countries, among them Egypt, Morocco, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, and Senegal. So far, Morocco's received the highest number of vaccine doses from Sinopharm, 1.5 million doses, and is expecting an additional order of about 43 million doses, while Egypt has received 650,000 vaccine doses from the company. Now, earlier this year, China pledged it would provide free vaccine aid to 53 countries, including 27 African nations. Back to you.
Chinese President Xi Jinping continues his visit to the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region in southern China. Earlier on Tuesday, he visited the Anthropology Museum of Guangxi in the capital city of Nanning, where an exhibition featuring Zhuang ethnic groups' culture is on display. He watched ethnic art performances and also learned about local people's efforts in promoting solidarity among different ethnics and in protecting the culture of the ethnic minority. Today is the third day of President Xi's visit to the Southern Autonomous Region. He had visited several other cities and villages, inspecting local poverty alleviation and industrial development, and also remembering the party's history of revolution in the region. Let's move to West Africa now, where in Nigeria, 2 students at a university in Kaduna State have been reportedly killed. Their deaths followed the murder of 4 other students last week. Authorities in the northwestern state say the students were first kidnapped by bandits before being killed. The attack on the university is the 5th targeting learning institutions in the region since December. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the attacks, describing them as barbaric. Buhari has pledged that government agencies will deal with the criminals behind the attacks. Well, CGTN's Deji Badmus joins us with more from Lagos. Deji, thank you so much for joining us. Reports indicating that kidnappers have killed 2 more students abducted from a Nigerian university. Very sad news, Deji. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, Hannah, it's actually true. I mean, it's been confirmed. The state government, the Kaduna state government actually confirmed it, that the security agents, the military this time, actually found the bodies, and they found the bodies in a similar fashion that the 3 that were killed about 3 days ago were found. So 2 of them killed. But the problem now is, up till this moment, no one actually knows how many people, how many staff and students now were taken from the school. And the latest killing now, we understand, 1 a student and 1 a staff. So there's still no clarity as to the number of persons, whether students and staff now, that were taken from that school. So nobody has an idea how many are still with their abductors.
Deji, it's very concerning that what's been happening with kidnappings being so rampant in Nigeria. Can you speak to us about what the reasons behind these kidnappings are?
Well, look, Hannah, the truth is that kidnapping has become what I'll call a profitable enterprise now, profitable in quote, even though it's not the kind of word one should use. But people are making a lot of money from this. The amount of money being spent on ransom alone is really huge. And you have a situation where, for instance, say some very poor people who have access to guns, and they go into kidnapping, they make a lot of money, and the moment they taste that money now, they don't want to give up the trade, so to speak. So it's become like a trade, and that's why it's become so rampant, especially in the north of the country, where hardly a day goes by without people getting kidnapped. So that's where the problem is, and one of the reasons why I think it is thriving is because there's not been I would say a very powerful response now from the security agencies to deal with this. People get kidnapped, the kidnappers never get caught, nothing happens. So it only emboldens the kidnappers now to continue to kidnap more people. So it's only when you have a very strong response now from the government, from the security agencies, that this situation can actually be brought under control. But as long as people continue to profit from this, it's difficult to see how this is going to end.
And what's even more tragic is not just the kidnapping, is now we're getting reports of these deaths. Yesterday we reported that militants attacked an army base in northeastern Nigeria. What is the latest on that?
Well, Hannah, that attack actually happened at Mainok. Mainok is a town about 50 or so kilometers away from Maiduguri, which is the capital of Borno State. Borno State, as you know, is the birthplace of Boko Haram. What we understand is that ISWAP fighters now, that's a faction of Boko Haram, raided this military base and killed a number of soldiers. But the military has actually issued a statement on the attack. The military says a number of the ISWAP fighters were actually killed and that it lost 7 soldiers in that attack. But there's also another story about the Air Force now mistakenly targeting troops on the ground and that about 30 soldiers were killed. That has not been officially confirmed. The Air Force says it is still investigating that, but if that turns out to be true, there's no question at all that it will be a disaster for the Nigerian military. But on this latest attack, the military says it was able to repel the insurgents and that a lot of them were killed, 7 soldiers and a military officer, of course, lost their lives.
Thank you so much for that, Deji, and also for giving us that new update on the recent developments that you've just spoken of. Deji Badmo speaking to us live from Lagos. Well, let's now turn to the latest update from Chad, where the country's Transitional Military Council has announced the appointment of an interim prime minister. Here's CGTN's Asatal with the details.
Following the death of President Idriss Déby, a transitional military council was shortly established. His son, Mohamed Déby, was charged as the president of the council. And now the council has announced its interim prime minister.
Albert Pahimi Padake is appointed prime minister and head of the transitional government. Article 2. This decree, which takes effect from the date of its signature, will be registered and published in the official journal of the Republic. N'Djamena, 26 April 2021. Signed, the President of the Transitional Military Council, Lieutenant General Mahamat Idriss Déby.
Prime Minister Padak previously served in the same seat from 2016 to 2018. He is seen as an ally of the deceased President Déby. This time, however, his appointment comes as the country faces turmoil.
This appointment comes in an extremely difficult context for my country, where we have just experienced the tragedy of the death of Marshal Idriss Déby Itno, who represented a basis of stability not only for our country, but for the whole of the African continent, particularly in the face of jihadism.
The military announced that President Déby was killed by the rebel group, the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, otherwise known as FACT, during a battle on the front lines. The subsequent decision to install an 18-month transitional military council met backlash from the opposition. The African Union expressed grave concern over what it termed as a military takeover. The newly appointed interim prime minister, however, pledged to hold elections at the end of the transition period.
Ensuring that Chadians together lay the foundations for a great national consensus so that at the end of this transition, free and transparent elections can be held, which will ensure that the devolution of power in Chad is no longer a matter of guns but of ballots. This is the context in which I have been appointed.
The Transitional Military Council has also rejected the idea of entering into dialogue with the rebel group FACT. It has instead gone on the offensive, asking neighboring Niger to help root out the group's leader and fighters. Astatal, CGTN.
Well, to further discuss what all this means, we're now joined by Dr. Paul Simon Handy, a senior regional advisor at ISS Africa. He is based in Dakar, Senegal. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Handy. Dr. Chad's military has named the country's former prime minister, Albert Pahimi Padak, as head of the transitional government. How do you foresee him tackling the country's immediate challenges, especially from a political and security standpoint?
We're actually not sure how he will fare, because we actually don't know exactly how powerful, what competencies he will have compared to the Transitional Military Council. We know he's not going to be naming the members of government. He's not going to be removing them. So That's the job of the new president. So I do not expect many changes. Clearly here, I think the Chadian transitional government gave into international pressure to appoint somebody who might not be from Déby's party, but has been an ally of Déby's party for the longest time. So for me, it is the maintenance of the transitional military arrangement, no serious change.
Doctor, the death of Chad's president has had the country's neighbors fearing increased exposure to terror groups. What are the implications of recent events in Chad to that region?
It is clear if you see the quality of the number of heads of state who attended the funeral, you will understand that they basically went there for two things. First of all, to pay their respect to the former president, to the deceased president, but also to make it clear to his son, who is now succeeding him, that Chad needs to maintain its engagement, its military engagement in the region, particularly in the Sahel, but also in the Lake Chad Basin. So those countries led by France need Chad's military, particularly its engagement in the Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin. But that poses that raises the question of, does it have to be a military government in N'Djamena? Does it take a military government in N'Djamena that actually does not respect basic human rights to maintain that kind of engagement in the region? That's a question we should be asking, because we have to also look inwards, and particularly also at how Chadians react to the unconstitutional change of government that happened in the country.
Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. That was Dr. Paul Simon Handy, a senior regional advisor at ISS Africa. Well, let's not take a short break and return. More news, including Egypt's transport minister overhauls body-running railway services. The WHO says disruption of immunization programs for diseases other than COVID-19 has put millions of children at risk.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Let's go to Egypt now, where the transport minister there has overhauled the management of the body running the country's railway services. The changes are part of the government's efforts to improve railway safety following a number of accidents in which dozens died and many others were injured. Adel Mrouhi reports.
The train's brakes were suddenly and hardly pulled. I fell out of my seat over the passenger in front of me. I heard a loud bang, and during that time, the train was maintaining its speed. The coach kept swinging right and left very hard. We didn't know where we would fall. Then the coach flipped to the left, and I fell over some passengers, while others fell on top of me.
Asim Rashid recalls his experience aboard train 949 when it derailed on 18th April. 23 passengers died, and about 130 were injured in that crash, the latest of 5 train accidents that Egypt reported in less than a month.
I ran to the door, but it was high above. I could not reach it. Someone broke the glass, and after several attempts, I managed to jump out of the train. Once I was out, I kept running. There were a lot of my friends, relatives and neighbors on that train. I wanted to look for them.
Asma El-Qanuti is a mother of 4. Her husband was the chief of the same train that Asim was on. The couple were preparing for their son's wedding in May. Instead, the family ended up holding their father's funeral.
When I learned that my husband's train was involved in an accident, I rushed to Cairo. I went there hoping that we'd come back home together. It's a shock, a big shock. In 4 months' time, he would have been promoted. He wouldn't have needed to board trains anymore. They're talking about financial support, but nothing will make up for losing him.
These are just some of the many stories of train accident victims all over Egypt. From 2006 to 2018, the country officially reported an average of more than 1,100 trains-related accidents every year. The deadliest was in 2002, when 350 passengers died after a train caught fire and kept speeding for 9 kilometers.
The frequent accidents that we saw recently and the repetition of train accidents in general are primarily because of the human factor in managing the system. We have many in the control systems, traffic lights and alarm systems. Since 2014, we've been developing, but the railroads in Egypt stretch for 9,500 kilometers. We need a lot of time.
Egypt says it needs about $14 billion to develop its railroad network, which is one of the oldest in the world. So far, only 15% of rail control and alarm systems in the country have been developed. The remaining 85% are operated mechanically. That means they heavily rely on humans to operate.
We managed to decrease a lot of accidents that mainly took place at railroad crossings. The most dangerous crossings have been shut down, and we've built bridges or tunnels that increased the safety at crossings. At the less dangerous crossings, we developed the alarm systems. Before, we used to hear accidents every other day.
54,000 employees work at the Egyptian railroad network. Their salaries alone amount to $270 million. This is seen as one of the main causes of accidents, as the $25 million annual deficit in funding leaves no budget allocation for rail maintenance.
The private sector must become a partner in operating the national railroad. Bringing them as investors will help in speeding up the development and reduce mistakes that lead to accidents, because by nature the private sector is more flexible than government employees. We need fundamental solutions.
1.4 million passengers commute daily by trains. Egypt has 3,500 passenger coaches and 820 locomotives. Most of them need to be refurbished or replaced. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The World Health Organization has warned that it believes the lives of millions of children in Africa are at risk. This due to the disruption of immunization programs by the COVID-19 pandemic. WHO's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus was addressing the media in Geneva, where he said that life-threatening diseases like measles, polio and yellow fever still posed a huge risk. Here's CGTN's Wanja Mungaya with more.
Decision dates
Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has warned of a looming health crisis in Africa and other developing countries. He says the ongoing coronavirus pandemic has caused millions of children to miss their regular jabs for other diseases. A World Health Organization survey has revealed that over 60 mass immunization campaigns in 50 countries globally have been stopped.
New WHO data shows that as a result of COVID-19, 60 immunization campaigns are currently suspended in 50 countries. That means about 228 million children are vulnerable right now to deadly vaccine-preventable diseases such as measles, yellow fever, and polio.
The United Nations Health Body reports that repercussions of missed immunizations are starting to be felt. In some parts of Asia, particularly Yemen and Pakistan, there are reports of measles outbreaks among children. The WHO ranks measles as one of the world's most contagious diseases. Currently, it accounts for 23 of the postponed immunization campaigns, posing a danger to many children. The United Nations officials blame the ongoing coronavirus restrictions, especially lockdowns, for the halting of immunization programs, although challenges in achieving targets existed earlier.
Even before the pandemic, we were losing ground in the fight against preventable child illness. 20 million children were already missing out on critical vaccinations, and I will place measles and polio at the top of my list. And now, a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, we are still making up lost ground.
The United Nations now insists that routine inoculation programs must be maintained to save the lives of children worldwide. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Malaria remains a leading cause of death in many developing countries, especially in Africa. Despite progress made in treating it, the disease continues to have a huge impact on the continent's populations and economies. CGTN's Robert Nagila tells us more.
With much of Africa still fighting to control the spread of COVID-19, news that a vaccine against malaria has been developed with a 77% efficacy could not have come at a better time.
For the first time, a vaccine has reached the efficacy level that WHO have been looking for. They want a malaria vaccine with 75% or more efficacy by 2030. We think we can do that. So 77% is the highest yet and could really add to the existing tools that we use to control malaria.
WHO says Africa continues to carry a disproportionately high share of the global malaria burden. In 2019, 94% of all malaria cases and deaths were on the continent. According to the World Malaria Report released in November last year, 409,000 people died from malaria in 2019. Most of them were young children in sub-Saharan Africa. 6 countries, among them Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Burkina Faso, Mozambique and Niger, accounted for half of all malaria deaths worldwide. In recent years, efforts to control malaria have been scaled up, reducing mortality by an estimated 44% in the past decade. But the disease continues to have a huge impact on economies and their populations in Africa. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says direct costs associated with malaria, including illness, treatment and premature deaths, have been estimated to be at least $12 billion per year. CDC says the cost in lost economic growth is much higher. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's turn our attention to Somalia now, where opposition supporters have been protesting against the extension of President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo's term. In addition to those protesters, gunmen are reported to have taken over parts of the capital Mogadishu. Security forces, however, say that they regained control of the state sections. This comes after Farmajo signed a law passed by the lower house of parliament extending his mandate by 2 years. Somalia was set to hold its first one-person, one-vote election in decades. Stakeholders, however, failed to agree on conditions for the polls.
We are the intellectuals of this country. We do not want the extension of the president's term. The country must hold elections. The failed president must resign. We do not want him to be in power.
Let's now take a short break and return your business news, including Total suspends Mozambique operations after Islamist militants attack town. And Nigeria's manufacturing sector struggles despite central bank stimulus.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's not get into the business news. A French energy giant Total has suspended operations at a site exploring a major gas field in northern Mozambique, weeks after Islamist militants attacked a nearby town. The company says that it is withdrawing all its staff because of the evolving security situation there. Dozens of people were killed in the March raid on the town of Palma. Total's $20 billion gas liquefaction plant is the largest foreign investment in Africa. Its Afungi site is near Palma, which has been repeatedly attacked by militants linked to the Islamic State group. The 4-year insurgency in Cabo Delgado region has left more than 2,500 people dead and 700,000 people displaced. Mozambique's President Filipe Nyusi has promised to restore peace in the rest of Cabo Delgado province. Well, Nigeria's manufacturing sector is still struggling more than a year after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The latest sector report from the country's central bank shows that the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index for January 2021 dropped by 4.7 points to 44.9 index points from the 49.6 index points recorded in December of 2020. This is despite the central bank's stimulus for the manufacturing sector in that country. CGTN's Deji Badmus examines the outlook for the sector.
With the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced a $3.27 billion stimulus for the country's manufacturing sector. The central bank governor recently announced that at least 30% of the fund has been disbursed to 76 manufacturing firms in the country. But the decline in the manufacturing sector for the month of January does not suggest the impact of the fund is being felt in the industry, at least not for this textile manufacturer in Lagos, who says he's yet to access the fund.
Honestly, things are very tough, and nobody can predict that it's going to survive it. Well, what we are trying to do is to try to add more courage to stay afloat. But stay afloat, producing without customers coming, because there's no circulation of currency, of money.
With demand also plummeting, Adebayo's textile factory has not been fully operational since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. It's a similar story for most domestic manufacturers, and added to the problem of low demand is access to raw materials.
It's very difficult for manufacturers to get forex to source their raw materials. And when you are going to get it, you get it mostly from the black market because you can't get supply from the central bank and from the regular banks. And even when you export, you are not able to use your proceeds that are in foreign exchange directly. It will have to go through the central bank, and you receive the naira, so-called naira equivalent at the CBN rate, which does not bear any relevance to what is happening in the market.
Nigeria is facing a severe forex shortage as a result of a drastic drop in government revenue from oil sales, which accounts for about 90% of the country's forex earnings. In addition to the perennial problem of infrastructure, these challenges are combining to depress local manufacturing and mainly account for the drop in the Purchasing Manager Index in January.
We have applied to the CBN, please bail us, because we don't want to close that. If you close that, you know how many people, if you sack one person today, you sack 10 people. The husband, the wife, the children, and the people surrounding them. Nobody is even fighting for profit now. We are only struggling to maintain our workers.
The central bank has said it will continue to support local manufacturing to help it bounce back. And with only 30% of its stimulus package disbursed so far, it's still got about $1.8 billion left to disburse. Perhaps it's only a matter of time before manufacturers like Adebayo benefit from the stimulus and get his factory to begin to run at full steam. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
We'll now bring you more details on that inaugural BRICS manufacturing conference, which recently took place in Johannesburg. It was aimed at helping South African manufacturers take advantage of South Africa's membership of BRICS so they could grow their businesses. Angela Coppola brings us that story.
The South African Manufacturing Working Group, organisers of the event, encouraged cooperation on projects where there is potential for collaboration across the 5 countries and by raising awareness about opportunities in BRICS markets. And that's to tackle the dwindling contribution of the sector to GDP.
Remember, if you look at the 1994 figures, we're slightly above 20% in terms of contribution towards GDP, and that has dropped significantly from around 20% all the way to 12%, and that's worrying. Do we have the market for manufacturing in South Africa at this stage? I think at this stage I can say it's currently dropping because of our overall performance of the economy, so we need to look at export opportunities to grow our market.
Identifying those viable opportunities to grow market share and discover new markets is key to that growth.
The Clarita project, for example, is one we showcased just before lockdown in end of 2018. And there we're looking at possible licensing arrangements with other BRICS partner countries to leverage the IP that we own and to create the solution that goes across BRICS countries and then into the rest of the continent.
Most African countries still export unprocessed materials. This has to change, analysts say.
So there's an opportunity for us to take lessons and grow our share of manufactured goods that we export to those economies. Every percentage point would count not only in jobs, but also in the economic impact for South Africa.
Some would say South Africa's manufacturing sector is in a sunset phase. Others see this as an opportunity to grow it back to what it was in the 1990s. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Somalia's economy is projected to recover to 2.9% this year and 3.2% in 2022 after a COVID-induced slump. Somalia's real GDP grew 2.9% in 2019, but shrank by 1.5% in 2020. Apart from the pandemic, Somalia's economy was hit by severe flooding and widespread infestation of desert locusts last year. Growth has also been affected by reduced foreign direct investment as investors shied away from contentious elections that remain on hold. CGTN spoke to the Director General of Somalia's Finance Ministry, Suleiman Omar, who highlighted the country's current economic situation as well as the efforts put in place to revive the economy from the impact of COVID-19.
The ministry tried to take steps. The first the first step that we took was that we assessed the severity of the shock, economic shock that has been hit to the country. After an assessment, we come up a plan that we can at least how we can reduce at least and how can effectively we address the shocks, especially the COVID-19, which was new to even to the world. We try to at least by the time that we make an assessment, when the lockdown already started, we come up at least to reduce the amount of tax on commodities, especially the items that essential is for the life of the society. We are optimistic in recovery in 2021, 2022. And then is the development of the COVID vaccine. We think that the economy will at least revive. And we are optimistic that when the pandemic is lifted over, then the economy will be reviving. And we still keeping our economic reforms.
Well, we're taking a short break. Here's what's still to come. We'll look at how innovation is transforming electricity generation in Tanzania.
Its effects are surreal, but its existence is undeniable. Mother Nature is fighting back against a species that is destroying it.
We're here to raise our voices. We know that climate change has already started and it's killing us.
It hurts. Amid the tears and the grief, however, there is hope for resolution.
We need to live in harmony with nature.
We focus on the deeds, the deals, and the people working to make a difference. This is Surviving Climate Change, only on CGTN.
I believe we only need a tool
to bring change. And this tool, to me, it can be educational background, it can be a skill, it can be a hobby of what you love.
Kibira yenyewe ilikuwa mbaya kitambo, kulikuwa na waizi wengi sana. Na siku hizi yenyewe hata unaweza kaa bila kusikia hata mwizi ameshikwa mahali ama amechomwa ama amefanywa nini. Ndio naona yenyewe Kibira raundime si kama kitambo.
One of Tanzania's stated goals is to elevate itself from its current middle-income status. The government plans to do this through industrialization, which has created a huge demand for electricity. Today, we bring you the story of one inventor attempting to meet Tanzania's growing energy needs through a unique electricity generator. Here's Isaac Lucando with the details.
This workshop might be mistaken for a junkyard, but what comes out of it is enlightening. The strange-looking gadgets strewn across the room conceal an electricity generator that may revolutionize electricity generation in Tanzania. Roger Msuya, its 52-year-old inventor, says what's unique about the generator is that it uses magnets to generate electricity.
I am an expert in water pumps and electricity generating machines, but the difference is that the generators I make don't use fuel, they use free energy. So I've been researching on getting energy without using energy.
The idea of a free energy generator, or generating power from a never-ending source like a magnet, is not a new one. What got the government interested in Msuya's invention is his ability to make easy-to-use units that generate up to 155 kilovolts of electricity that can even power a street.
An expert from the government confirmed that the magnets can indeed generate electricity. Other experts went on to satisfactorily measure the amount of electricity generated and saw that by using this technology, it is possible to generate large amounts of electricity that could be entered into the national grid.
Earlier this year, the Ministry of Energy formally recognized Msuya and his invention, and is now looking at ways to partner with him. With a total of 1,600 megawatts of electricity currently being generated in the country, the government wants to add on other sources of electricity in addition to hydropower, solar, geothermal, and wind power that are already in use. According to the government, Tanzania's long-term plans are to increase the country's electricity capacity to 10,000 megawatts from various sources by 2025. The government sees the inventions of people like Roger Msuya as key to reaching this goal. With only a primary school education, Msuya's success has been fueled by an intense love of electrical engineering. Having once made a helicopter that actually worked, he says his main challenge is accessing capital to realize all the ideas he has.
Any money I get, however little, I invest in these projects. I might have some money in my mobile money wallet, but I direct everything here because if you don't create, what will you have to show? If you don't research, what will you have to say?
Msuya makes a living by selling the generators he makes to whoever is interested. However, he's not yet done inventing. He says he aims to pass on his skills to the younger generation and keep providing energy solutions to light up his country and the African continent. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
We're taking a short break and return the latest from the world of sports, including South Africa makes winning start to 2023 netball World Cup qualification campaign.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Time now for your sport news, and we begin in South Africa, where the netball team there has made a winning start to their 2023 World Cup qualification campaign. The Proteas came back from a long lockdown break to take top honors at the Tri-Nations tournament at home, where they convincingly registered 6 straight wins against Zambia and Uganda. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa's netball team extended their unbeaten run to clinch their first title after emerging from a strict lockdown. The year-long put the brakes on sporting events and team training, causing some anxiety among the players.
Having to train alone and then coming into here, doing the court sessions, doing everything together as a group is quite different. And sometimes it doesn't matter how much you trained individually, doing these type of sessions is really exhausting. I think the important part was to ensure that everyone is at good states, mentally, obviously, and physically.
The Proteas also suffered a major setback, losing many international players in the last year. But getting their first tournament win has boosted the team's confidence.
Yeah, the spirit in the team is really great. The experienced players really stepped up and take the youngsters and the new players into the team really well. They're helping them at, on and off court to adapt, and we really am grateful for this opportunity.
The focus remains on preparing for the World Cup, which will be hosted by South Africa in 2 years.
Everyone wants to stay at the top and represent their country. So I think that part of it, in terms of development and having the depth in our country, is brilliant. So maybe this going on and going forward is probably literally going to be what we need, with a whole lot of other things obviously on the side. But we need depth, and I think this setup here, obviously before this Power Challenge, is creating that for us, not just for us as players only, but for coaches as well.
Wow, we're very excited. I think at this stage we're just taking it like one tournament to the next, just to get the combinations going and to start building on the basics, working towards 2023.
The Proteas are ecstatic to have their first win under their belt. They can now put a long and stressful lockdown behind them and focus on polishing up their game as they head towards the World Cup. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, over in Uganda, the COVID-19 pandemic shut down sporting activities there in March of last year. Now sports competitions are slowly returning, but continue to face a challenge of strictly observing COVID-19 guidelines. Uganda's Sports Council is now threatened to suspend sporting activities if the guidelines are not adhered to. Here's CGTN's Leon Senyange with more.
A typical rugby match atmosphere in Uganda. But against the resumption guidelines, sports fans have drifted back into stadia to attend live sports events. Such scenes have become a big concern for the local sports council.
Subject to resumption, we also require National Sport Federation to apply for clearance. One of the key issues is that we wanted that the list of the people participating in the games are published, the COVID test results are provided, the venues for those events are gazetted.
Uganda recently opened up on resumption of sports with strict guidelines. All open-air sports activities were to resume without spectators. It was in a bid to prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
In the absence of these federations taking accountability and responsibility, I think I would not want to drag sports activities to be a source of problem for government.
The Sports Council says federations must acknowledge the risk of athletes contracting the coronavirus from fans who attend sports events. The local football and rugby federations have been cited for their failure to abide by the said COVID-19 regulations. The Sports Council now says it may have no option but call a stop to their sporting activities if no immediate action is taken. While all mitigating measures are being put in place, properly effecting the guidelines remains an uphill task. The rugby union says the lack of appropriate sporting facilities is a major drawback to dealing with spectators.
Our stadia are not purely for rugby. They have restaurants, they have other activities that happen there. And as a rugby union, we don't own facilities.
More than 3 football clubs have been sanctioned for violating the guidelines on funds.
We are policing the observance of our own regulations
And our competition is the disciplinary panel has made a number of judgments against our entities that seem to be not to observe the regulations.
Uganda has so far recorded over 40,000 COVID-19 cases, while the pandemic has forced a change in the fans' experience. Keeping the country's sportsmen and women safe remains the top concern. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
In football, Real Madrid and Chelsea are gearing up for the first leg